Hello and welcome to the final Around the Nest of 2014. I'm Jesse Goldberg-Strassler with the Lansing Lugnuts. There's the 2014 baseball season to recap, and there's a lot to talk about as we go down the road. AAA Buffalo, AA New Hampshire, High A Dunedin, Single A Lansing, and all the way down to the short season, Short A, the Vancouver Canadians. Vancouver is the only team remaining alive for postseason contention. Things did not last very long for the Dunedin Blue Jays. They were swept out in 2 games. Meanwhile, Vancouver in 2 games has already knocked out Spokane, and it's going to be interesting to see just how far they can go. A reminder that you can find Around the Nest online. Go to aroundthenest.mlblog.com. That's aroundthenest.mlblogs.com. We begin our final week of 2014, bringing on the voice of the Buffalo Bisons, Ben Wagner. Ben, how are you?
Doing great. How are you?
Doing fine. Let's begin right at the top, 14 season.
I don't know if you can narrow down the list within the 10-minute segment. I mean, honestly, think about all the acquisitions and roster moves that Buffalo has had to go through, the number of surprises from Kendall Graveman, Daniel Norris. I would even put Brett Wallace, which was an all-star acquisition. He had 7 home runs, including a game-winning walk-off grand slam. With Buffalo, finishes the year with the Bisons, just about a .320 batting average or whatever it was. Just right there on the cusp of potentially earning a September call-up as well. You have a number of guys that go contribute, some surprises, some role players at the major league level. This was about as a chaotic but yet rewarding season as to be a AAA affiliate, and thus the ultimate insurance policy that a major league team could want from their AAA affiliate. I think it was a pretty well-rounded, up and down, but yet somewhat in terms of what role is asked of a AAA team, regardless of the season or regardless of the success or struggles of a major league component. That's exactly what Buffalo was able to fill, because there were so many highs for the Blue Jays earlier in the year. There were so many lows, especially in June, that the Blue Jays had to endure, but yet they found the pieces, and they found the right pieces to keep both clubs maneuvering and obviously adjusting their roster throughout the course of the year properly.
Speaking of those, the pieces that get plugged in, the Buffalo Bison season ends, and then 7 Bisons are immediately called up to the major league club. What was the feel in Buffalo like?
Well, I think it's somewhat of a surprise, because guys that you may have expected to go up, like Steve Delabar and Kyle Drabeck and Rob Rasmussen, were left on the outside looking in. And from a fan perspective, you think, well, hold on, they were here earlier. Why wouldn't they be here now? But from an organization standpoint, you're also kind of testing the waters, and you're showing these guys, hey, this is what it's like to be a major league baseball player. This is what it's like to be in a highly competitive, and now that the Blue Jays have won 5 straight, also very intense atmosphere. From a clubhouse perspective, what they want to do, from an atmosphere perspective, like going to Boston and then coming back home down the stretch with a lot of September home ball games as well to be part of. Let's wet the palate. Let's give these guys a taste so they can go out and have that little bit of motive to do the right things this offseason, to come to spring training hungry, fight for jobs, and maybe if you're left on the fray, then fight to get back there as soon as you can if that opportunity warrants itself earlier in 2015. So I think there was some shock on an individual basis, but there was also a lot of elation, too, from a player development standpoint, that guys, in a lot of cases, were surprising to get themselves to that point, but also from a player development standpoint, rewarding organizational overall, because you did it the right way. You got guys ratcheted up quickly through the system if they were deserving. You tested them at different levels, and Dalton Pompey's and Kendall Graveman's and Daniel Norris's of the world, there you are, right on your doorstep to take the organization to the next phase of success.
Let me ask you specifically about Dalton Pompey, because I remember asking you about Kendall Graveman and how that strike throwing was working out, especially with the infield defense behind him. I remember you raving about Daniel Norris blowing away the competition as impressively as any pitcher you've seen. So what were your impressions of Pompey once he got that bat going?
You know what? That's interesting because he was a bigger player than what I expected to arrive to Buffalo, and his athleticism showed on the field, both in terms of versatility, but also in terms of what he was able to accomplish on the base paths, at the plate, being a switch hitter, a much more complete package than what I originally had expected to see. You can label guys, you can talk to different scouts that have seen him, and until you give it the eye test, and that for me weighs so much, the eye test overall. Here's a guy that had an idea what he wanted to do at the plate. He talked about different things that he was able to develop over the course of the year to make him a more complete player. For example, dropping a bunt down and dragging it with him, depending on what side of the plate he was on, to get an easy base hit, or utilizing his speed to stretch a single into a double, make it a hustle double. Or maybe the most important part of his game that I realized at the AAA level, his leads are absolutely perfect when he's on the base paths. Whether it's first, second, he will maximize into the pitcher's mindset how much more he can get or how much less he can take in terms of being safe to get back at first base or get that extra half step to make sure he's successful in stolen base attempts, which he was perfect in Buffalo, and which obviously at Tampa Bay we saw in his Major League debut was extremely far off of first base, and even for a young guy, had trust in his stuff, trust in the overall intellect as a baseball player when he's out there on the base path to feel out the situation. So that plus, of course, his defensive prowess when he played center field every day for the Bison was pretty impressive. And if he makes the Major League roster, obviously they've got a star in the making. If he needs more seasoning next year and he comes to Buffalo or wherever those assignments may be, clearly he's right there on the cusp of making his Major League debut and cementing it for the future.
Ben Wagner, the voice of the AAA Buffalo Bisons. We were entering this past weekend, and it was shaping up to be a classic, the likes of which the International League had not seen. Buffalo didn't make it, but how was everything all sorted out?
Well, the International League finished up in Buffalo's mindset, 143 games on the schedule. They had lost one early in May, with 142 being meaningful ball games. Buffalo is not eliminated from the postseason competition until the second to last day of the year. Syracuse claimed the division in the IL North, and you knew the IL North was going to be the most competitive of the three divisions. So Syracuse claims the IL Northern Division. Pawtucket slips in with the wild card, and then the Western Division is tied at one game apiece right now in between the Western winner, Columbus, and the Southern winner, Durham, which was the first team to clinch in the International League. So right now, it's a 1-1 series in the West and the South, and Syracuse knocked back on their heels a little bit because of the final series that they played against the Bisons. Pawtucket has a 2-0 advantage, and tonight, as we speak on Friday, has an opportunity to clinch.
That final game of the season for Buffalo, to me, fascinating. 20 base hits in the game for the Buffalo Bisons, 26 total hits between them and the Chiefs. 10 total runs were scored. Buffalo wins at 8-2. And yet the game takes 2 hours and 19 minutes to play. So how entertaining was it?
It was an aggressive entertainment because Buffalo unofficially swung at 22 of the first 23 first pitches thrown that were in the strike zone. So if it missed for a ball, it was taken. If it was in the strike zone, the Bisons were hacking. And that has to be the MO sometimes, in the unfortunate label of minor league baseball on the season's final day, if teams are playing for something or if they're playing for nothing. You go up there, first pitch swing, and that's kind of the chatter that you hear from both dugouts. But it was an aggressive style. Aaron Lappy was not good, to be honest with you, and we have seen Aaron Lappy at his best as a former Bison as well when he rattled off 8 consecutive winning decisions. And he was 3-0 against Buffalo with minimal harm in the 4 starts that he had against Buffalo, even this year individually. But he came out a little bit flat, and the Bisons, which had a very, very strong lineup, capitalized on him and rallied for early runs and really never took their foot off the gas in a runaway win and runaway hit total as well.
Let's look ahead now to next year. First, what does the offseason pose for you?
One more time, Jesse, please.
For you, for the offseason. As I'm on the road riding while I'm conducting the show, what are your plans for the offseason?
Me personally?
Yes.
I think we're going to hang out. We're going to hang out next week in Toronto, and September 11th. We're going to talk. Yeah, we're going to talk pitch talks in the GTA, and hopefully Blue Jay fans, since it's an off day, can come join us at Pitch Talks, which is, I believe, this year's 7th edition, which will be a lot of fun. It's something that you and I have noticed on Twitter, picking up a lot of buzz, and talking with Kevin Kennedy, who orchestrates the whole thing. This has really become somewhat of a staple now over the course of the Major League regular season on the off days, where passionate Blue Jay fans can get together in downtown Toronto or in the outskirts and come together and ask people in the know, so to speak, their thoughts, have a lot of fun, and maybe have a few brews together. And then my countdown begins, to opening day. Outside some football and basketball coverage from a personal broadcast standpoint, I mean, we are full steam ahead of 2015 and being back on the yard.
Forward to it, 2015.
Well, I think the starting lineup for Buffalo should be outstanding, whether it's the rotation from 1 through 5, depending on who breaks out and makes the Major League rotation, or, if they determine that some guys need to fit different roles in the bullpen, that should be really, really exciting. And the Blue Jays as well, having consecutive years proven that they will invest in minor league 6-year free agents, which those are the guys people don't know about 6-year free agents. You've been part of an organization, you're not on the 40-man roster, and you can elect to become a free agent. Toronto has really been active in seeking these veteran guys that are available in the waiver wire. They have either proven themselves on waivers or as free agency as being clutch, high-perform caliber players at AA and AAA, and can be major insurance policies. Guys like Dan Johnson, for example, Brett Wallace, and Matt Haig, Colt Hines, obviously, recent names that have been taken off the 40-man roster for the Blue Jays. Mike Zagorski is another one out of the bullpen. Neil Wagner was one of those guys as well. So seeing Neil come back and perhaps at full health, perhaps at the very tail end of next season, will be one of the things that we're really looking forward to, plus the success of the homegrown talent that has continued to filter its way towards Buffalo over the last 2 years. And I think for an organization standpoint, they got a stigma that they were depleted after a couple of major blockbuster trades. Bison fans and Blue Jay fans now, either in Western New York or Southern Ontario, are seeing them filter their way through the system, and nothing should be a catapult into 2015 from what we saw from 2014 with the success of those guys from the mound and on the diamond around.
The great Ben Wagner with the Buffalo Bisons. Ben, thank you very much, not only joining me this week, but all season long, and letting us know the latest goings-on from Coca-Cola Field.
Jesse, I thank you so much for your efforts. I thank the fans for tuning in, sending their questions, and now to the great partnership of Bluebird Banter and promoting this great weekly feature that we put together.
Season, or perhaps till next Thursday in Toronto.
Sounds great, Jesse. Just 216 days away. Thanks.
That's right. Ben Wagner, you can find him at BenWag 24/7. Easy on Twitter. Meanwhile, the Buffalo Bisons found easily online, the AAA affiliate for the Toronto Blue Jays. Well, while we wait for our next guest, let me play an interview from earlier this year with Vince Horsman, the Toronto Blue Jays single-A pitching coach of the Lansing Lugnuts. Here's Vince Horsman from earlier this year.
This is Jesse Goldberg-Strassler, joined by Lansing Lugnuts pitching coach Vince Horsman. Vince, we begin right up at the top. 2 years ago, Aaron Sanchez was on your Lansing Lugnuts rotation. Now here he is in the major leagues. How did you feel when he got called up?
Oh, I was excited for him. Anytime that the hard work that you put in pays off, and you reach the top, and fulfill your dream of one day pitching in the big leagues like Aaron did, it's a very exciting time. It was very nice to hear the successes that he was having the last couple of years once he left Lansing, and ultimately getting to the big leagues and the successes that he's having up there. I talked to him and wished him luck and all that stuff, and we have a pretty good rapport, me and Aaron still. And I know what he was going through because I remember what it was like for me, and I just wanted to wish him all the best. It was very happy. I was very happy for him.
There's a journey that a pitcher goes through in terms of how they themselves grow on their way through the minor leagues. What kind of growth did Aaron have here in Lansing?
Well, I think at this particular level, what I try to teach all the guys is just understanding who they are. Some of the guys come from high school and they pitch a certain way, or they came from college and they weren't used to maybe taking control of their own games, and the manager was always calling pitches and whatnot. And what I try to teach these guys is to learn who they are and what they're going to do and how they're going to get their outs. And that was the same with Aaron. He was a young power pitcher, and he had heard, that everybody always questioned his command. And I told him, don't worry about command. I said, you can take Nolan Ryan early in his career, and he didn't command the ball all that well. Well, he's in the Hall of Fame, So I just told him, just relax, go out there, trust your stuff, be yourself, and just let your talent, come to the forefront.
From Aaron Sanchez to Daniel Norris. Norris last year, when he joined the Lugnuts, he was coming off a rough 2012, and then he did not enjoy his start of his 2013 season. It was a tough April and into May, and now he's one of the top rising prospects in all of baseball. What happened with Norris last year?
Well, with Danny, it was just a matter of getting his mindset right. I think, it was a kid with a tremendous amount of ability that just didn't trust it. There was a lot of self-doubt, lack of confidence, and really it wasn't a whole big adjustment mechanically. We basically worked on one thing the whole time he was here, but it was just changing his frame of mind. And once he was able to do that and started going out there having some success and then feeding off of that with the confidence that he started having, he just carried that into this year, and now the young man's sitting in Buffalo.
Does it surprise you at all to see how quickly he's risen?
Well, how quickly it all happens, yeah, because you don't see that very often, where 1 year a kid's pitching in low A ball at this time. Last year Danny was, and now all of a sudden, he's one step away from the major leagues. But it also shows how fast it can really happen when a kid starts to get it and it clicks for him, and how fast that the movement can occur.
When you talk about fast, Kendall Graveman's name comes to mind. From Lansing to Buffalo in one season. How did that happen?
Well, Kendall he gets it. He again, when I tell kids, about the style of pitchers they are and what they need to do, Kendall just gets it. And we had a lot of lengthy conversations in spring training this year about what area of his game he needs to improve on in order to move through the system, and he took to those. Took to that advice, and he really worked hard at improving in those areas. And then he came here, and he was very dominant here, and he just continued along with that role. And all of a sudden, there's another kid from Lansing to maybe the big leagues in September. You never know. After
a guy leaves here, how much do you hear from them personally? How much do you hear from the pitching coaches about how they're growing once they've left Lansing?
Well, we try to pay attention to what's going on with our other affiliates. We get to MLB.com, and once in a while, I'll pick up the phone and I'll call Darryl or I'll call Jim and just to see how he's doing. But you don't want to get too involved, because you do your part at one level and you let the other guy do it at his level, and continue to build the foundation that was set forth, and build that pyramid. So. But we do follow them. We do pay attention to what they're doing, whether they have a good game, bad game. We do get the reports that tells us how they're throwing and all that stuff. And once in a while, they'll shoot you a text or an email or something, with the social media and all that stuff, and let you know how everything is going. And even once in a while, when things aren't going so good, they'll give you a shout and ask you, what did we do last year that kind of helped me get out of it? And then you'll just kind of touch base and just try to get them going again in the right direction. So, it's like they're part of your extended family. At least the good kids are, and the majority of them are. And what you want to do is just be very impactful in their life and in their career. And I think in our system, I think all of our pitching coaches have a tremendous amount to offer each kid at each particular level. And I think we all feed off each other. I do my part here, and Darryl adds his part, and then so on and so forth. So. We're very much in this as a pitching core with Dane as our leader, and when